Why do I even care if no one of you ever seems to mind the mistakes that I make? And if you can't get something right, then just work with it. That's all I have to say. And now let's get to the review of the Asus Zenbook 3. When I saw this device the first time on IFA 2016, I was highly impressed. But not just because of the fact that it is extremely compact and lightweight, no. Also because of the fact that it did not pack the Core M as I expected it to do, but an actual Core i5 and even Core i7. But so much performance in such a small and compact device comes with a few trade-offs and compromises. And I will get into those later on. But if you can see already on the site, I am using the highest end version available in Germany. This means i7, 8 gigs of RAM and 512 gigabytes of SSD storage. On Amazon.com though, I also found a 16 gigabyte version, but I highly recommend you not to go for that unless you really need 16 gigs of RAM and the high amount of storage, because there is an also way more reasonable, way more affordable, lower end version with an i5, 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigabytes of storage. And I will tell you one thing. I think out of the box at least you will get even the better experience with that one. What I mean by this I will tell you later on. But now let's get into the design and build quality. It is super thin, as you can see, with 900 or 910 grams, also super light and also very compact. Comparing this now to the MacBook Pro 13 Retina from 2014, you will see how much smaller it is. Of course, here we have 12.5 inches instead of 13.3, but it is so much more compact, so much thinner and so much lighter. And this is just great to see since we have pretty much the same amount of performance. In terms of build quality, also everything really nicely done, because you have this nice, beautiful circular pattern. It is very sturdy, doesn't really bend at all. We have some nice plastic feet on the bottom, still protected well enough from sliding, but after it still does that. 2 speakers here and 2 more inside. This is what I just have to assume for the airflow, because I did not find anything else that would look like it. On the left side we have the headphone jack. On the front we have a cutout to open it, and on the right side we have USB Type-C, USB 3.1. If we take that already mentioned cutout, we can easily open this lid with one hand, but I still think that it is a little bit too loose in terms of the hinge, because if I pick it up and put it on the desk, a lot of times the lid will open. So they could have made it a little bit stiffer, but at least it's still okay, absolutely no problem. If you take a closer look at the keyboard, I have 2 complaints about that, but before I'm going to talk about that, let's show off the lighting here, because you can already see it looks like it is yellow because of the yellow letters, but in reality actually we have white backlight obviously, and you will see this shining through, but this is not a problem. I just wanted it to be mentioned, and you can already see if we press this, we have 3 steps, because we have off, 1 step, 2 steps and 3 steps of backlight, which is definitely something you don't really get on every device, but it's nice to see. And as you can already see here, we have 2 more speakers here on the front. In terms of the design of the keyboard, I have to say the only thing that I'm missing here is the function lock, something that I really miss a lot, but seems to be a common thing on Asus laptops, but you have still the extra function buttons. The keycaps itself are a little bit bigger, something closer to like a MacBook, and you will have to get used to that, but this is something that you don't have to get used to much as the actual feedback itself, because you have 0.8 millimeters of travel, which really isn't a lot. The typing sound actually, as you can hear, is good enough, absolutely no problems, but it's the lack of tactile feedback that I was just missing and the amount of travel. So you can get used to it, and I guess the longer you will have it, you will. But I think you will never get past the point where it's just an okay keyboard after all, because I noticed that I made more mistakes than I usually do. Okay, in terms of the trackpad, I have to say really good, but one of the best ones that I've actually used, and also has a fingerprint reader. I can show you this one, and as you can see, it works out really nice. And if we now go into Chrome, I can also show you how well the trackpad works, because it reacts really nicely. It's very precise, sometimes maybe a little bit too slippery, but still therefore recognizes all the gestures very well, which is something that I still know to appreciate a lot more. And this, after all, as I said, is one of the best that I've used so far, and the size is also absolutely nice. Now let's talk about this 12.5 inch 1080p IPS display. And the first gripe that I had with it, that video out of the box looked extremely weird, extremely grainy, and this is due to this option called sharpening, because out of the box it was turned on along with some other enhancements, and I would just recommend you turn all of them off, especially the sharpening, which just ended up in a really weird video. But if we talk about the actual qualities of this display, I have to say I'm actually really pleased, because the sharpness 1080p on 12.5 inches works still absolutely fine. You don't need scaling, but I used 125 that it came out of the box, and this is still absolutely fine. The maximum brightness, in my opinion, is absolutely good, among the better ones. The dimmest point, though, not all that much, but it is still okay. I used 40% all the time, which was more than usual people or most people would use, but I tend to prefer my displays a little bit brighter. But outdoors, I would say the glare is more of an issue. The white point, absolutely no problems here at all. I like it, doesn't feel too cold or doesn't feel too warm. And one of the highlights here is the black, because super uniform, no backlight bleed at all, just not the deepest blacks. In terms of color, a lot of contrast and maybe a little bit too much saturation. I just noticed that everything seems a little bit too much, but you can get rid of that. Just take off a little bit saturation and you will get a great experience, because after all, what I would like to call this display is fully satisfying. It is not the most impressive one out there. I've seen better displays, but I wasn't disappointed by it at all and was fully pleased. And this already from me means quite a lot. So now let's get into the sound and check what we've got here. If it would start, which it doesn't seem to. Weird. Okay, let's try this once again. Okay, my opinion on the speaker setup, because we have two on the front and two on the bottom, and this really results in an actual really good sound performance, because for a device as thin and compact as this one is, the maximum volume was more than fine enough. We had, though, a little bit of distortions due to the metal chassis, and I've seen this on a lot of other metal laptops. You just hear the resonance, the vibrations of the actual chassis itself. I don't think it's the speaker so much, but here it's actually way more bearable and way more minimal than on some other devices. I've seen this actually a lot worse, and the sound balance actually still quite a lot, because for such a thin device, there is actually quite some bass, mids and highs there. So overall, for a laptop, the experience absolutely fine, and the headphone jack quality itself is pretty much on a same level, very good, absolutely pleasing. Now let's talk about performance here, and let me show off the SSD speeds. Not super impressive, just 500 and about 500 in write speed, but since this is not a high-end or high-performance laptop, this is still absolutely okay. I don't really think I have to show you off that the browsing here works absolutely flawless. Super smooth, super nice with the trackpad, but that was to be expected. But I have to say one thing, and this is something that is quite important for me, because I've used the i7 version, but I did use it at 75% of performance. Why? I will tell you this in a few seconds, but first of all, about the performance itself. You can do everything you want to on this machine. You can edit videos, but I wouldn't really recommend it after all, because it is just a dual core without discrete graphics. It can be done, but unless you maybe use something like Cyberlink, or if you use Premiere, you won't get the best experience. Cyberlink should work out quite fine, and every other day-to-day tasks can be handled well. I wouldn't use this for gaming, really some extremely light gaming, and I didn't really try to bother about. But this is meant to be an ultra portable to get office work done and maybe some other stuff, and this can be done brilliantly on this device. And this is what I think is the main attraction of an ultra portable. I don't think it's meant to be a workstation, so that is fine. And that's why I did cut off the performance 75%, which ends in a performance even lower than the i5 version. But this is for one reason, and that is cooling. Noise and heat is the next thing that I want to talk about, because the noise out of the box wasn't all as good as I wanted it to be, because even on lower end lighter tasks, the fans kicked in way too often. Not loud at all, very subtle, but still they did. And I noticed that when I reduced the performance to 75% in normal use, I did not notice any sort of difference, but what I noticed is that the device then was like 95% of all the time completely silent, unless I maybe blocked the intakes on the bottom. So this is absolutely fine with me. If you can't live with the compromise, and that is the reason why I would say go for the i5 version, because on the i5 version maybe you won't have to reduce the performance and already have that kind of fan behavior. If you want to use it though on high performance mode with full load, the actual loudness of the fans are absolutely okay, because they are still very subtle. You will hear them, but not loud at all. And even though it is a very thin and small fan, it sounded super even, which is great. But the other thing that it comes along with that, the device doesn't get so warm. It didn't really get extremely warm all the time, and especially since I didn't really put too much stress on it, it didn't either. But like I said, my recommendation is just lower the performance to the point where you don't notice it, and you will benefit, especially also along with the battery life. Because if you quickly check the charge time, 2 hours and 50 was my very first charge, and I got this device completely new. And I think it got even a little bit faster, so I would expect maybe like 2.5 hours. But what I think also improved the battery life was the reduced performance, because what I got at first was around 4.5 hours, which definitely wasn't all that impressive. And later on I was closer to around 6 hours. I would say ranging from 5 hours with a little bit of heavier use, even up to maybe 7 and more hours of use. And I would say an average of 6.5 of normal use. This was my use with about 40% of brightness all the time, and I did not felt held back. But then 6.5 hours for my use that I can compare to other devices is already actually on the higher end of the segment, and something where I'm very pleased to see that. Now, let's get to the software. Like I said already, out of the box, definitely change the graphics settings, turn off the sharpening, and just reduce all the other things in terms of enhancement, because you won't need them, and it will make the display look a lot more natural. The other thing is we have the normal amount of Asus bloat, nothing to really complain about, and you can get rid of all of that as well. And then in terms of software, I would just recommend you to lower the performance if you have the i7 version. But if you don't want to, that's not necessary. And I would already like to go to the pros and cons. Let's check them. Of course, it looks a lot on the negative side, but as you already know me, maybe I like to emphasize on the negatives just so you are on the sure side and don't regret your purchase. But first of all, the good things. Incredibly thin and light, obviously, yeah. This is its main highlight. It is just super compact, 900 grams. It makes it super portable, and I really enjoyed that. Premium build quality, can be open one-handed, something I appreciate a lot. Very good trackpad, even though I don't care about it at all. I still don't like trackpads in general. Good speaker, especially for its size, and not just for the size. This is actually on a good level, period. Very good daily use performance. A normal use, I could do all browsing, video watching, and everything that I do usually on a laptop, which is something not super demanding though. I could have get away with a Core M as well though. If you have some more higher end needs, maybe look for something just bigger, but if you want something ultra portable, this is what you want. Good times in normal use, it just got barely warm, no problems here at all. Can be mostly silent, and that is my hint. As I said, reduce the performance, and I know I'm emphasizing a lot on that, but this really made a huge impact on my experience on this, because at first I wasn't really happy with this device because it was way too loud for what I got with it. When I reduced the performance, I did not notice any difference in terms of performance, but then I enjoyed the device just so much more. That's why I talk about this so much. And the fingerprint reader, of course, are pro. Now let's get to the negative sides. Hinge could be stiffer, not a problem, but something that I want to be mentioned. Shallow keyboard, and that is kind of, after all, my biggest complaint, because the typing experience is just okay. You can get used to it, but it will never, I don't think it will ever be great. Only one port. Besides the 3.5mm jack, it is just USB Type-C, not even a USB Type-A, but yeah, I guess we all know who we have to thank for that. Slight speaker and chassis distortion, this is what I meant about the speaker, so you will hear sometimes some resonances, depends on the volume that you are using and the kind of content that you are listening to, but quite a common thing these days. Also, not always silent in light use. What I noticed that even with the reduced performance, maybe if I block the intakes a little bit, there were the fans in, or the fan was kicked in, but so subtle and so quiet that I just say not silent, but super quiet, that I didn't really notice it at all. Cooling and thinness compromise. Like I said, if you have something as thin and lightweight and as compact as this, you just have a few compromises. After all, that was to be expected, but you can get past of all of this, or most of this, without any bigger issues, and then questionable by default. This is what I meant. I think just the i7 doesn't work so well in terms of the cooling solution with all of that, and especially then the odd video settings with the over sharpening, and that leads me to my end. As I already said, to bring this down to a conclusion, I would not recommend you, as I've showed you, the $1,550 version, unless you need the 16GB of RAM, because if you get the i5 version and you don't need the 16GB of RAM, 8GB of RAM is plenty, 256GB of storage should be plenty enough, and you don't have to reduce the performance of the i5. It should be already quite out of the box, and then you just get what I would like to call pretty much one of the best ultra portables. And yes, there is something like a MacBook Pro, but if you use this for 1100, here the value is actually good, because I would not know any other device that is so thin, has this kind of performance with the overall pretty much flawless qualities for this price, because nothing really tanked here. Display, fully pleasing, and this is very important for me. Display is something that I look at after all the time. At sound was good, performance was good, and even the battery life was good, something that I did not get at first. And this makes it definitely recommendable if you want something ultra portable. And I would personally, if I would have the chance, switch this out with my MacBook, because I don't need the performance. Both of them are super fast, and I would even be fine with a Core M here. But as what it is, this is kind of what I want. I want something that is super lightweight. The only thing, once again, that I was just not so impressed by was the keyboard. All I have to say, and I hope you have a lot more to say in the comments down there below. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, leave a subscription if you want to, and otherwise enjoy the day. And I hope you like this review after all. So yeah, have a nice day. Bye.